Hello, everyone. This is Attorney General Keith Ellison with Affording Your Life, your podcast about fairness, justice, and consumer information. This is not legal advice, but important information you can use to help you afford your life. Hey, this is Attorney General Keith Ellison on our podcast called Affording Your Life. And let me introduce my guest for today, Mr. John Moeller, who's the leader of our wage theft unit. How you doing, John?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you, man.
You too.
And Anna Vergara, who is our wage theft investigator. How you doing, Anna?
Doing great.
Yeah, well, you guys work on wage theft all day. Mm-hmm. What's it like?
Well, it's great. We're out talking to the community, just getting things started. One of our first big goals has just been to get the word out that we're doing the work, to talk with worker centers like Satul and
Awood,
the Awood Center, a whole bunch of unions who are working to protect workers' rights. We've been meeting with employers too,
right.
Construction industry. Yeah, just letting people know that we're here, that we're trying to do the work, and making those connections to make that possible.
Anna, why is it important to stand up when people are victims of wage theft?
Well, oftentimes, especially low-wage workers are really impacted. And so, $200, $300, that means you can't pay your rent. Or
$300, that's like dinner and school fees maybe. And
Yeah. And I've gotten cases where folks have to move out of their apartments, try to figure out where are they going to go and live because they don't want to get evicted. They don't want those things on their records. Wage theft impacts all these other facets of people's lives. And, it goes so far to the point that there's things that are impacted we can't, really do anything about.
And so what is wage theft? If y'all could just define it, because there might be somebody out there thinking like, wage theft, wait a minute, maybe that happened to me.
Yep. So wage theft is any time an employee is not paid the wages that are owed to them by law by their employer.
Yeah. Does that happen a lot?
It does, and wage theft can mean a lot of different things. It can mean you're not getting paid overtime. It can mean that your employer is taking your tips. It can mean you're being misclassified, so you're not getting paid minimum wage, overtime. It can be that you're getting things deducted from your paycheck that you didn't agree to. It's a really broad thing. To
go into this definition of wage theft, let's talk a little bit about a word you used. You said misclassified. Mm-hmm. What's that? Misclassification,
most people who do work are considered employees. Some employers try to get around protections for employees by classifying their employees as an independent contractor. Basically, the idea is that this employee isn't an employee, it's a business person who they're contracting with. And it's really common in certain industries like the construction industry, the janitorial industry, trucking industry. And employers do this because when a person is an independent contractor and not an employee, then the employer doesn't have to pay them minimum wage, overtime. They don't have to pay work comp taxes, unemployment insurance taxes, payroll taxes, like your FICA taxes,
right.
et cetera, et cetera. But it's not something that an employee can just agree to be an independent contractor. You're either an employee or you're an independent contractor, and it's a factual test. So even if an employee, because they want this job, says, okay, I'll be an independent contractor, by law, that doesn't matter. They still have these rights that are given to them by law.
So if my employer tells me when to get to work, tells me when to leave, makes me wear the insignia of the company, makes me drive a vehicle with that, gives me the tools to do the job, and then turns around and says, here's your block of money that I'm going to give you. You don't have any benefits at all. You're just an independent person, but you do everything I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it, how I tell you to do it. Oh, and by the way, you don't need any other job. You work to work. You just work for me. Mm-hmm. You said that might be bogus?
Yes, exactly. Totally bogus.
Yeah.
Well, you see that. I've seen it.
Yeah. So there's one other kind of misclassification.
Okay.
And it's when an employer classifies an employee who should get overtime as someone who's exempt from it.
That's another type. Yep.
Yeah. Because certain employees, like professionals and administrative employees, they're exempt from these overtime requirements. Basically, people who are paid on like a salary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you are supposed to be getting overtime, but they put you in sort of like a management job just to sort of avoid that, then that ain't right.
Right. That's illegal too.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
So look, we spend a lot of time thinking about employees. What about the employers? I mean, does fighting wage theft help them?
It does, because oftentimes employers that are following the laws are undermined by those employers who aren't actually.
You mean like we're trying to fight for a level playing field?
Yep, that's correct.
A good example is in the construction industry, where you've got materials which cost a certain amount, and employers who are following the rules, they're bidding thinking that they're going to pay their employees right. And if they're bidding against companies who are planning on wage theft, basically, if they're planning on misclassifying workers so they don't have to pay overtime, so they don't have to pay all these different taxes, then the employers who's following the rules is at a competitive disadvantage. So fighting wage theft is going to help those employers.
What are some of the reasons people are victimized by wage theft? I mean, like, does it just happen to anybody? I'm sure it could happen to anybody, but does it usually happen to anybody?
It happens to all kinds of people. I see, complaints come in, and it can be someone that's making $12-14 an hour to someone that's making 70,000 plus a year.
Yeah.
So no one's really immune to it happening. Sometimes folks recognize it right away. Sometimes they don't. Oftentimes, before coming to us, they'll try to fix it themselves, go to their employer, and it isn't until they realize, my employer isn't doing anything about this. They've been promising my money for such a long time that they, end up reporting to us.
Yep.
Yeah. Wage theft can happen to anybody, but it's most prevalent among lower wage earners, and it's especially prevalent among immigrant communities.
Yep.
You've got a lot of times where somebody might not have legal status, or they might be on a temporary visa, so they're afraid that if they report wage theft, then their employer might retaliate by contacting immigration authorities. This is an example Anna brought up earlier, but you could have a situation where you have like a mixed family, in terms, like some people are documented, some people aren't. And so the employee who's experiencing wage theft might be afraid that if he brings a spotlight onto his own situation, it could affect his family members. Yeah.
Sure. Does it hit people in rural and the city and suburban areas? I mean, is it more of a city thing, or is it a rural thing too? Greater Minnesota thing too?
It is a rural thing too. We were actually just doing outreach out in rural Minnesota, and what we have seen so far from our outreach is employers who choose to fluctuate wages, don't honor their contracts. And sometimes if there's one issue, such as wage theft, there's a bunch of other maltreatment that's happening at these companies. So
so these bad actors just don't do one bad thing, huh?
Yep. They might give them bogus housing, if they're a migrant coming over. They might also lie and give them a different wage, and then once they get here, they realize, it wasn't this much amount. It's actually significantly lower than that.
Sure.
And so that's some of what we've seen locally in rural areas.
So what should a person do? Like, let's just say I'm working this job. They told me I was going to make $10 or $12 an hour. My check is light, meaning lightweight, below what it should be. What do I do? I might go to my employer. They say, well, forget about you. We're not paying you. What do I do?
You should contact our office, the Minnesota Attorney General's office.
All right. I contact the Minnesota Attorney General's office, y'all. Online, call us up, whatever.
We've got complaint forms that you can submit online. We've got an intake room, so if people call, they can report wage theft.
We also have a bunch of resources online in case folks aren't sure if they are experiencing wage theft or not, or if they know that this is happening to a Spanish speaker or a Somali speaker. Or
we got language capability?
Yep.
Okay.
So you can call us and we can look up multiple languages to be able to communicate together.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, what if can I call Dolly too? Can I call my city that I live in?
Yeah, you can call the Department of Labor and Industry. They're kind of our enforcement partner. We're going to be working closely with them moving forward to make sure that we're using all of our resources in the most efficient way possible. So you can contact Dolly. You can contact Minneapolis if you live in Minneapolis, or if you work in Minneapolis. St. Paul if you live or work there.
Yeah.
In some cases, the U.S. Department of Labor can make sense. Yeah, there are a lot of different options, and what we're trying to do is fill in gaps. So one thing we haven't talked about is that we have, in the new wage theft law, we have authority to enforce some new laws that not even Dolly has the authority to enforce.
Like what?
One big thing that's in Chapter 181, which is one of the
Like Minnesota Statute
Yeah,
181?
Minnesota Statutes 181. That's the chapter where kind of your kitchen sink wage laws are. And Dolly can enforce some of them, but not all of them. We, with the new wage law, have the authority to enforce all of them, including or a lot of the Women's Economic Security Act.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah, so one thing we didn't mention as wage theft is equal pay.
Yep.
Women are entitled to be paid the same amount for the same work as men. So if a woman's working for some manufacturing company and she's making $15 an hour and her male counterpart's making $17 an hour, that's wage theft too.
Yep. Well, so I know that they passed the Women's Economic Security Act, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we at the Attorney General's office are in a position to really make that legislation mean something for people.
Right.
So, are there industries where there's more women, where there's sort of a lot of female workers, home care? I mean, is this a problem that might hit female workers harder in some cases?
Definitely PCAs. We've gotten quite a bit of complaints in that industry.
So the PCA is the patient care aid.
We see folks that just don't get paid quite often, or have a different wage. Those are the two types of issues that we see in that industry quite often.
And who are some of the folks who work in that industry?
The folks that work in that industry are predominantly older women or new immigrants that come in, women of color, immigrants. And so oftentimes they're dealing with very labor-intensive work, odd hours. And, this is an older community an aging white community that they're working with. So sometimes there can be a little bit of tension that they often deal with.
Like
there
cultural,
as well. Cultural, racial.
All that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we often see there, these home health personal care aides, they're people who work crazy hours. Like they'll be basically living with some of these elderly and infirm folk who need care. So they could be potentially working 80, 90 hours a week. And in some cases, their employer pays them no overtime. So that's a big issue that we see in the home care industry.
That's tough. So, there are situations when workers are not being treated fairly. Maybe they're not getting treated the right way. And sometimes those workers are locked into arbitration clauses so that instead of going to court, they got to work it out with a arbitrator that the employer usually picks or whatever. Can the Attorney General do anything about that?
We can. We're not a party to these arbitration agreements, so they don't apply to us.
Right.
So if an employer has these arbitration agreements with employees and they're just using those as a tool to avoid the workers banding together, that's a case where instead of trying to bring their own case that's going to get kicked into arbitration, they can come to us and we can help all of the workers who are being affected by the illegal practice.
Yep.
And a good example, or an example of this recently, you had the Chipotle case where you had hundreds of workers who brought a class action case and they got kicked into arbitration because they all had mandatory arbitration agreements. and then Chipotle just refused to file their arbitration fees, so they didn't go anywhere. So these can be real hindrances for workers to make sure they get paid.
There's other hindrances. Oh, yeah, Anna?
I did want to. Sorry, I know that we spoke about immigration earlier, but I do want to stress that even regardless of someone's immigration status, they can still contact us.
That's right.
We're not going to.
This is a more important point.
Yep. We're not going to report someone's immigration status. We're not even going to ask you. So the point is you shouldn't be suffering through wage theft. And oftentimes these are the main breadwinners that are, working and not getting their wages.
So your immigration status is not our business.
Yep.
If you are getting your wages stolen by somebody, give us a call. We're here to help.
That's correct. And I also speak Spanish. So.
Oh, yeah? Prove it.
Saludos a todos. Yo soy la investigadora Ana. Si están sufriendo por el robo de salarios, me pueden llamar a mí.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Muy bien.
Thanks. Now you try, Keith.
Oh, no. I'm studying, but I'm not as good as you. So,
Along the lines of protecting people's immigration status, there are also whistleblower protections in the state.
Sure.
And the identities of people who complain about wage theft is actually protected by law. So if people come forward to us, we're not going to be telling people Adam Smith came and told us about this wage theft issue. So the identity.
So people got privacy protections.
Yeah. People have confidentiality protections.
It's good
if they
to
want
know.
to come forward. Yeah.
It's good to know because people get nervous, don't they?
They do.
People get afraid. Like if I tell, because see, people, they really, really need that job. They like to get their money. They like to get every penny that they're owed, but they need that job. And if they lose it because somebody retaliates, that's a real fear. What if somebody is a victim of retaliation? Is that legal for the employers to fire somebody because the employee complained about a wage theft problem?
That is not legal. Minnesota has whistleblower laws that protect employees who are fired because they report a problem. It can be reporting a problem to the employer themselves, or to us, or to Dolly. And if an employer fires or demotes somebody because they've made that kind of report, then the employee has a legal cause of action.
So that's like an extra problem.
Right.
So if you're an employer and you don't think, or you're mad that your employee told on you, and then you take action against them for that, you've just added to your woes.
That's right.
So don't do that. Anna?
I do want to add one other piece. Something that I see very often with workers is that they might feel a little bit of shame in coming forward, especially if they've been suffering through wage theft for quite a while. They might feel like, oh, this, how could I let this happen to me?
Right.
And we really want to encourage listeners to come forward because it's not your fault that you are working for a bad actor. So.
Absolutely. Well, let me just say, this is very good advice in many occasions. We know, so another thing that our colleagues do a lot on is consumer protection. How many victims say, how could I be so dumb that these people let me scam me? How could I have fallen for that? And the truth is, it's not you. These are people who are really skilled at taking advantage of other people. Mm-hmm. So if you feel like you are the victim of wage theft, speak up. That's your point, right, Anna?
Yep, that is.
Yeah, and if you feel like you're the victim of a scam, speak up. As we wrap it up, let me just say, talk to me about your passion. You guys are both really talented. Why is this what you're putting your time and energy into?
I've dedicated my career to human rights, and in my view, economic rights is a human right. I mean, you can't live without a job. You need money to pay for stuff. That's the society that we live in. So ever since law school, I've been working with immigrant rights organizations. Out of law school, I did plaintiff work with a firm called Nichols Caster, class and collective action work. I'm trying to fight for fight for the little guy, and I've been really proud to continue that work at the Minnesota Attorney General's office.
Thank you. Thank you for your work, John.
Yeah, and for me, it's a little bit more of a personal note. When I was younger, my own father and my uncles actually experienced wage theft, and I, as a little kid, had to translate for them. And so I really just want to make sure that other people feel empowered with, that we're here, we have the right tools, and they don't feel so powerless like, my folks did when I was younger.
So you're fighting for justice.
I am.
You too, John?
Me too. Yeah.
Well, me too. Hey, soy Keith Ellison por escuchar. Te veo pronto.
Gracias por escuchar. But you said Keith Ellison too fast.
Oh, I said it too fast.
Yeah, it sounded like smushed.
Okay. Should we do it again?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Good enough? Good enough?
I think you should do one more take.
Okay.
Yo
What did I
soy
say?
Yo soy Keith Ellison.
Yo soy Keith. Say.
Yo soy.
Yo soy Keith Ellison.
Gracias
Gracias
por escucharnos.
por escuchar. Huh?
Nos.
Por escucharnos.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now let me do that. What did I just say? Yo soy Keith Ellison. Gracias por escucharnos.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto. Hey everybody, this is Attorney General Keith Ellison with Affording Your Life, the show about fairness, justice, and consumer information. We're not distributing legal advice here. If you have a legal problem, either call us or contact an attorney. Check in and see us next time on Affording Your Life with Attorney General Keith Ellison. Thank you very much.